Welcome to Through the Lens of Christ, a podcast designed to have conversation about things that are happening in culture, questions that we may have theologically, and other questions that impact our day in and day out lives. Our desire is to be able to build these conversations and to be able to get us to critically think, not just about the events that are happening, but how do we see these events through the lens of Christ. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and I hope it helps you to critically think through issues in our lives. Well, hello, Steve.
Hello, Adam.
Hi, Ashley. I like that she can't actually be heard back. So it's always good to get together with both of you and have the three of us have some good conversation. I do like being able to kind of walk through the text that we've been walking through on Sunday mornings, and just being able to spend a little time and talk about things that stuck out and what are the things that we either need to clarify or didn't get to on Sunday, and the things that stick out to us because we all have different, the Spirit speaks to us all about different pieces, so it's all good. So we'll start reading it, Hebrews 11:23-31.
Okay, here we go. Verse 23, By faith Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents, because they saw that the child was beautiful, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking forward to the reward. By faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. By faith the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down, after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies.
Well, very good. There's a lot in there, right? Each of these individual verses could be at least an episode or a message on a Sunday morning. But so what stands out to you in there? So we begin with Moses, and then we move to some of the trials of the promised land, and then we see specifically about Rahab. But starting with Moses, what do you think?
Well, I guess in big picture, the whole thing, I don't know how many times by faith is mentioned in that section, but it's a lot of times. Yeah. I mean, if I had my paper Bible in front of me, I have it circled in my Bible as we were, on Sunday morning. I was like, I don't know, there's like 6 or 7 times at least, I think. Yeah. The other thing that strikes me is the difficulty that was endured by these people. I mean, these were not easy times, right? You went into it in the sermon about what was happening in Moses' time with the children, and then the whole thing with Rahab and the difficult. I mean, that's a difficult situation in and of itself. So those are the 2 things I think that stand. Well, I mean, the difficulty with leaving the Egyptians, right? A lot of people died. So I mean, a lot of people were saved, and a lot of people were perished at the same time. So big picture, I guess.
Yeah, and I like how all of chapter 11 really, because we'll talk about it this next Sunday, where he's talking specifically about Christian persecution or persecution because of your faith. Yeah. But then there's all these other examples of life's hardships, right? The things that may or may not be related to your stance of faith, but are just because we live in a broken world and there's fallen things. And so there's 2 types of suffering that he's talking about, but both of those we respond to in the same way, right? Understanding that God is faithful and that God is just and that he is good, and that by faith theme continues through regardless of the circumstances.
Yeah, and there's this 2-level thing going on here too. There's all these things that are happening, say, to Moses in that time, and his parents saw something different in that child to do something different with him. And Rahab, I mean, she saw something different in the people that were coming, and she did something different with them. So there's something going on, a spiritual thing going on. Obviously, well, as always, there's multiple things going on at the same time, and we get to see a couple of big categories and some of the little things in them. We never see them all, but there's just a lot going on.
Yeah, there's. I chose to not talk about it on Sunday because I just didn't have time, and it probably would have been lost on. I wouldn't have explained it well enough to be absorbed. But when he talks about, so in the NIV refers to Moses as being no ordinary baby. We go back to Exodus, and he talks about that he was a fine child. Were you reading ESV?
Mm-hmm. He's beautiful.
Right, so he's beautiful. So the true translation is beautiful in both places, right? It's this idea of elegance, of something beautiful. And so all throughout Scripture, you see this image of the beauty of God and the beauty of Christ. And so when they see Moses, they're struck by the beauty of Moses. It wasn't because Moses, the child, was beautiful. It's because he was anointed by God. And there was something there that they were just like, I have to do something different about this.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, do you think the other parents of children didn't think their children were beautiful? So, they were beautiful, but there was something else about this beauty that they noticed.
Yes.
So, to me, that's a spiritual work that's going on inside of their heart. And perhaps it's something in the child, too, because he was obviously chosen by God for this purpose. But they were able to see something different because of the spiritual condition that God placed them in. I think that's what I would say about that.
Yeah, and when I say like anointed by God, I don't necessarily mean like he was anointed and everybody could see it. When the Pharaoh's daughter picked him up, she only picked him up because he was crying, right? We don't see that she saw that he was beautiful and therefore picked him up. So I think you're right. It was this softening of the eyes of the parents to see what was going on in that, just the work that God was doing, right? Mm-hmm. And knowing that, okay, we're now part of this thing. And how do we look for the beauty in the world? Because God is doing a good thing all around us.
Yeah, that's good. I wonder, here's a genuine question. Yeah. Were they spirit-led in the same way back then? So, to me, that's a spirit-leading thing. Yeah. I don't know that there would be a difference. They didn't have the Holy Spirit in the same way, pre-Christ. But surely that's a spirit-leading kind of a thing. Yeah. Their eyes are opened in a certain way to see a different beauty and respond to it the way they did.
Yeah, and we see, I don't know, there's probably at least a half a dozen examples of the Spirit moving in people. It's to your point, it's in a different way, right? We're indwelled by the Spirit today, and then it kind of came and went. And the text doesn't say it, so I don't want to go too far, but it clearly appears that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. What did you see? Anything else that you wanted to bring out?
I'm always impressed by the Red Sea, right? Just the enormity of that event. And even, a lot of people can, this is, I think, how it's explained away scientifically. And I really don't want to explain it away. I want to actually sit in the amazing miracle that happened as the people are in this. You think about what happened. They were in captivity in Egypt. They're then being released from that. They had these 10 plagues, which impacted them as well. Mm-hmm. You've got the last one, which is, you think about this violent response back to throwing the babies in the river, and God saying, okay, I'm going to go do this thing and destroy the firstborn, but I'm going to protect you. And we can talk about the salvation message in that. But as they leave, you think about this mass, just all the emotion and all of the life change, and 500,000 to 1 million people heading out into the wilderness. And now you're faced with, it is all lost, right? We are dead. We thought we escaped. We thought that we watched God do all these amazing things, and we thought it was all good. And now look, all he did was bring us out here to the river to die. And then you just see him open up the river. And I'm always just so impressed by that movement.
There's so much of, talk of faith, but also a demonstration of a lack of faith.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's like, wait a minute, this is the faith chapter, and you're talking about, right, how they didn't, the real story is they didn't have the faith, and then God showed them something.
Right.
So I think maybe it's that God just has to intervene for faith to be made real. Yeah. I think of it this way, that God implants saving faith in us so that we have eyes to see. That's the pipeline of grace that he gives us so we can understand the world. But he's also showing them in real ways in the Old Testament, bringing those things to pass so that they can actually have their faith strengthened, and then can move and act in the way that they should.
Yeah. Well, we had a question, and we were talking about it earlier, is this tension around faith, right? Faith and action. Mm-hmm. How does that actually happen in our lives? Do I just put in more effort to show faith? Do I put in more effort to do? I read all these examples of faith from chapter 11, and now how much more effort? What is my, and I'm a doer by nature, right? So I'm like, okay, so now what does that look like? What do I need to do? Where are places in my life where I need to be more faithful and I need to do more things? And there's also this consistent theme throughout Scripture of abiding and resting and be still, and it's like where's the confluence of those two things, of this effort? I mean, First Peter clearly says that we have to participate in the divine nature, right? There's action. We're called to do something. All these examples in Hebrews 11 are action, but yet there's also this abide and trust and just be. And I just think it's such an interesting. I don't think we'll ever figure it out, but I do think it's an interesting conversation.
Well, yeah, for sure. It's like, what do I do? I mean, should I make a list for you so that your faith would be strengthened? And then what would that mean, right?
Yep.
I mean, it means that I have some extra wisdom to give you in a certain way, and if you follow my formula, that then you'll be first of all, be a Christian at all, or be a better Christian for that. So, I mean, I do think somehow it goes to the Spirit has to do this work in us, and at least has to pique an interest in us. For spiritual things in some way, and I think he does that in a lot of different ways. And once we have that spiritual interest piqued, we might be inclined to pursue it further. And the more we pursue it, if we begin to love it, we should just follow our loves and follow our desires. And in those ways, then I think he uses the means of grace to do that. Things like reading Bible, coming to church, talking to people, gospel presentation, nature. I mean, all kinds of ways that happens. And at some point in a lot of people's lives, I think they do have an opportunity to go, there is something more going on here than meets the eye. And they've got that intrigue, and then oftentimes they don't follow it. And I think that the reason they don't is because God hasn't opened that up to them, so they might follow it. And if they would, then they would go down a completely different path and have an opportunity to grow in Christ and be saved. So part of it is volitional. It's something I need to do, but a lot of the initiation, I think, is of God, and he uses other people to show that to other people, so that they might follow that. Is that a...
Yeah, well, I think actually what you're explaining in better detail, what we just talked about with Moses being beautiful.
Sure.
Right? It's there were, I don't know how many babies ended up in the Nile, right? Say 1,000, could have been 1,000,000. They were all beautiful babies, right? They were all beautiful. But Moses was different. It was beautiful in a different way. And his parents needed to respond, needed to act in that. And like I said, that doesn't condemn all the people who had their babies killed, right? I mean, this is, like I said on Sunday, like what kind of horrible decision are you faced with I wouldn't know how to respond in that situation. But yet in Moses' situation, the parents saw that he was beautiful because God opened their eyes. God did the work first. Mm-hmm. They had a baby just like everybody else did, but God opened their eyes to see something different in this baby, and then they had to respond. And so they're like, we have to hide him. We have to do something. We have to put him in the basket. I think that's what you're getting at, is that there's this, we have to act. Moses' parents clearly acted, but they didn't act because they were trying to protect their baby. They acted because God was in it and opened their eyes to something different, and they said, this is now what we have to do.
Right, and I think that event wasn't left to chance.
Right.
Which means that every single event that happened before that, ever since the creation of the world, was laid in place so that event would happen.
Yep.
Just like every other event.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So that to me, makes me go a step further and talk about God is sovereign over that entire situation. I mean, there is nothing that was unplanned in that whole thing. And as much as we want to think that we plan and we change history and we do things, we do, and we look back and we doggone it, God did that. It wasn't really me after all, right? Yep. I mean, this is the way the world works. And the older I get, I think the more I trust in that and believe it. I mean, I think I was probably saying, I believe in the sovereignty of God back in my 20s, right? Late 20s. Yep. But the more older I get, the more I actually feel that it's true. Yeah. So I can say things like, I understand the gospel. Here's what it is, right? Yep. But the feeling of it and the settled nature of it is different as I really strain to live in it.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's, as I said, like part of my nature is to do, and so I want to go save people, Steve. Right?
Yeah,
I want to go do this thing. I want to make the world a better place. I want to do these things. And the older I get, or the more spiritually mature that we get, it's like, okay, I've been called to participate in this. I've not been called to affect the
execute
change,
it.
Right? I'm just he's one of his graces is that it's like, I think about it like with when I was a little kid and my dad would be fixing a car, and he'd be like, "Here, turn this wrench." Or he didn't need me to do it, and I didn't fix that car.
Right.
But he was like, it was so cool that I was like, man, I'm out here. I was, and I go tell my mom, "Oh yeah, we fixed this, or we changed the brakes, or we did whatever," and I felt like I did it. I didn't do it, right?
No.
But I learned a lot in it, and he showed me a lot, and I think that's exactly what God does. He's just this good father who's like, I'm going to let you be a part of this. We often get it wrong where we're like, I did that. And, sometimes we have to be put back in our place, but you're right.
I don't want to compel anyone to come to Christ.
Right.
I want Christ to be made to be what he is, which is compelling, and that Christ himself compels people to Christ. Right. So that when we talk about, come to Christ, talk about believing in Jesus, it is, and that is where people, I think, kind of can go living it out, right? I'm living it out, and they'll just see it. Well, maybe, but it takes words too. It takes a relationship and a dialogue to get beneath the surface, to show that Christ is compelling by our words and our actions.
Right.
But I don't want to compel anybody to come to Christ for me, based on my conversation or my talk or my questions and answers.
Right. Well, I think Hebrews chapter 11 sits where it does in the chapter or in the book, because you had all this, hey, I need you to get out of the old Jewish custom. I need you to move out of the religiosity of all these events. I need you to move beyond that. And here I want to show you what it looks like to actually have faith in action. And it's not about, I do think so many people, even in our church, I think in every church, so many people speak Christianese. So many people understand that I should be a Christian, but they're trying to live out the beauty of Christ rather than actually see the beauty of Christ. And it's I
think it's very true.
Yeah.
Say that again. Right. They're trying to
live out the beauty of Christ rather than see it. Right.
I think that's very true.
And I think that's one of the things I struggle with so often is that I know that in my humanness, I'm capable of compelling a response from someone, right? And you really want to go, no, I don't want to manipulate this. I want you to see Christ for how I see Christ. I just want you to see, I want your eyes to be opened. And I know part of that is gospel expression. So I want to be able to share that in a way that is winsome, because that's what we should do. But yet I don't want to compel you to do it. I want you, to your point, I want you to be compelled to be there.
By Christ. I think that's why, going back to Hebrews chapter 11, even in this passage, these miracles are miracles. They don't make sense in this world.
Right.
It doesn't make sense that, someone would do the things that they're doing in Hebrews chapter 11, in these passages included. I mean, think about Jericho, right? Yeah. The Red Sea parting. These are miracles of people. Right. And so since they're not normally seen in this world, people tend to try to dismiss them. Yes. But that's exactly why they're there, and that's exactly why I think they're actually real.
Right.
So, they're demonstrated as historical things, with real people in real places, with an emotional connection to a physical reality, and a spiritual connection to all of that. So when on Sunday, this is one of the things I had thought of when you're talking about the Rahab the harlot, right?
Yes. Yep.
And that whole thing, and that whole Jericho thing. You go through the whole thing, and it's like, all these things happen, march around the city 7 times, blow the trumpets, and the walls come falling down, right? And you use the illustration too, like, well, that's, what's your Jericho, right? I mean, what are the walls? So there is definitely another side to that. There's multiple layers to this, but then the ending, and you may have mentioned this, or maybe you did, Rahab is living at that time.
Yeah.
Go ask her. Right. So just go find Rahab and let her tell you the story, because she's living. Just like when Christ is crucified, and is it Paul that says, there's like, or Peter, there's like 300 or 500 people that saw this stuff happen. Go ask one of them. They'll tell you what happened. Yep. So it's really makes it hard to just dismiss those miracles as figments of someone's imagination or some sort of another way of telling a story that's not in real time.
Yeah, and I had somebody did some research. I'll call it research. I didn't like it, so I don't want to say it's good research. But they were like, oh, well, the walls of Jericho fell down because there were so many people walking around and basically disrupting. So there's kind of like this mini earthquake as they're walking around. That's why God had them do it. And I'm like, do not remove the miracle of what God was doing. The point wasn't that the walls fell down. The point was that God did it, right? In a way that we could have never dreamed or imagined. And don't remove the human emotion of being the men walking around it. I'm sure they were like, no matter how much faith they had that God was going to do it, just as they grumbled throughout their entire Exodus, they had to be like, this is dumb. What are we doing? Why are we're going to die? Right?
I hope you're wrong. Yeah. Right? Yeah, you're being pessimistic. I'm hoping they're going, Dudes, we are going to do exactly what's happened, and we're going to see what God's going to do. But you're
Right.
probably right. Maybe there's a mix in there somewhere.
Probably.
Yeah.
I'd 7 days of it, right? I'm sure the
That's a
third
lot.
day they were like, we're in, we're revived, ready to go. But probably like day 4, like, really, is this going to happen?
Right.
So I don't want to remove that from the miracle, right? I don't.
Right.
I think they were blown away when it happened. I think they trusted, else they wouldn't have done it. But I think they also were like, I'm not sure. And then when it happened, just I don't want to remove that by saying, well, you know what? A hard wind blew and separate. That's what was the Red Sea.
Right.
Somebody came up to me after the service and said, well, it happened at the point of these 2 rivers. And so this wind comes and I was like, God was involved in there. And I appreciate that he moves the wind. And I appreciate that there's probably some scientific explanation. But I prefer to know that God actually works beyond physics and science. And he is physics and science. He does whatever he wants to do.
Well, right. I think that's the way too, and I think part of that is we're inclined to dismiss miracles.
Yes.
This is our nature as fleshy people, as lost people, as people in the world. That's our inclination, and so we try to write it off any way we can.
Yep.
But I think that's a help of getting older too. Little things happen and that seem coordinated, and it's like there's just too much stuff. I mean, I was looking back today. We had one of the pastors here, Dan, happened to text me today, and I had just maybe at the same time, but within 5 minutes of that, I said, I need to call him. And I looked back at my text to see how many times I've texted him. And the last time that we texted back and forth was July 21st of 2021. So we never text one another.
Some time.
Now, I'm not saying that's a definitive thing, right? It just happened. And it's right. But that kind of stuff seems to happen pretty regularly. And I don't want to go crazy with that kind of thinking because you can kind of get wrapped up in it. But just that was today's little thing that I felt like, yeah, God's in that somewhere, and I needed to talk to Pastor Dan.
Yeah. No, I think those things become more and more apparent, and you're like, we've been talking about doing a church plant in Kewaskum, right? One of the biggest things we've got is, okay, is God going to open up, like, is he going to give us a place to meet? Is this, if it's in his will, he's going to coordinate these things, and there's been some cool stories, like Matt Myram, who runs the funeral home, Myram Patton. And so, like, we've been talking to him about personal things, right, with Jenny's parents and everything. And they, so we've been having conversations. And so he texted me the other day and was like, oh, hey, I just wanted to let you know that if we really want to use our building for ministry, so if you ever feel like you guys want to do something up here, we'd love for you to be a part of it. And I'm like, I didn't ask him. Nope. He didn't know. He doesn't go here. And I'm not saying that's where we're going to do it, right?
Sure.
But it's like God coming in and coordinating things that have no business being coordinated. Right. And I just think and we can be called softies because we're old and a little more sensitive than we used to be. But you just see these things.
There's a patience there's a matured patience in just waiting for God to work when all kinds of stuff's in turmoil around you. Yeah. That knowing and trusting in the promises of God that He's going to come through in the end. And that whole idea about don't be anxious about anything is really important. So I was talking to somebody, same thing you mentioned just then about the Kewaskum plant. Someone was really lamenting how much it's going to cost. Well, do you know it's so much per square foot it's going to cost? I'm like, let's just see what the Lord will do in it, and let's work diligently but patiently and see what's going to happen.
Right.
I think surely these people in chapter 11 were doing the same. I mean, even Moses. I mean. He does one thing. I thought, wonder what the Lord's going to do next. I mean, I want to look at every day going, I get a front row seat to what God's doing in this messy, messy world. Yep. That's trusting in this. I think that's something about trusting in the sovereignty of God, knowing my place in it, that I have the ability to act when things come upon me and in my work or in my life with other people, and I should act. For sure I should act. Yes. But the results are the Lord's.
Yes. And I think that's exactly the point of chapter 11. That's exactly what it looks like to have faith in action. And it's just, I hope people can at least hear it in our voice. Like, it's actually fun.
This is exciting.
Right. And so it's a good thing. So anyway, praise God. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Adam.